something like 85% of conversations in English are held with no native speaker present. And
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Words of Limits. Today we have Hedvig. She is a language and learning coach, neurolanguage coach, and language learning enthusiast. She says that she's a big believer in the power of diversity. She uses her coaching training to help instill a sense that whatever skills and experience you bring to the table are useful, and I love that. And that curiosity, creativity, and an abundance mindset can be found in everyone. As a language and learning coach, Hedvig helps her clients to find their inner creativity and problem solving to face their communication challenges. And she imagines an inclusive world where everyone, regardless of background and circumstances, has access and opportunity to learn the language skills they need to succeed. So this is a wonderful introduction to her.
Thank you.
Well, welcome to be here.
Thank you, Maria. I love being here. I'm excited.
And me too. I wanted just to start asking you about your work. So you are a neurolanguage coach, and just please tell us more. What does it involve?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to answer this question because you can Google it, right? You can find out what a neurolanguage coach is, but I'm going to answer it kind of from my perspective and how I found it. And how I came across it. It was I know exactly when it was, actually. It was the Easter of 2019, so two and a bit years ago. And I was at a stage in my career where I had realized that I really wanted to work with languages. I studied linguistics and psychology at university, but since then, I had been kind of working in other things in other fields. And I had, once I'd realized this, had this realization about what I wanted to do, I had this urgency about me because I just couldn't, I had to get started. And I had earlier that year, I took a TEFL course, so a teaching English as a foreign language course. And that kind of gave me the realization that, okay, this is actually something that I really enjoy doing, and I definitely want to do it. And at the same time, I didn't love the idea of kind of telling people what to do. So I had this sort of idea. I thought, oh, but what if instead of being a language teacher, I could be something more like a language coach? And this was around Easter time, and I was just about to go off on holiday with my family. And but I had this idea in my mind, and I thought, okay, when I get back from holiday, I'm gonna, check this out. And I thought I'd had this brilliant new idea. And then, a few days later, I came back from holiday and I started Googling it, and it turned out there was a whole world of language coaches, different types of language coaches out there, including a qualification for neurolanguage coaching. Which I then ended up taking and getting a qualification, which is in fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the only kind of accredited language coaching certification that's out there at the moment. It's accredited by the International Coach Federation. So it actually involves a little bit of kind of life coaching principles and methods. But then on top of that, you have neurolanguage coaching, which was developed by Rachel Paling, who's a fantastic human being and just very inspirational. She's doing a lot of interesting work as well into kind of neuro heart education, actually, is the new thing that they're working on at the moment. I don't know a lot about that, but what I'll say about neurolanguage coaching and what it is that it essentially combines three different principles together beautifully. It combines language learning and language learning and language education with kind of life coaching, goal setting, and powerful questions, coaching questions that a life coach might ask you, like, how will you get to your goals? And every coaching conversation is going to be different, so it's built around conversation. And thirdly, neuroscience, so kind of what we know about how the brain learns and how we learn best. What we know for sure is that we learn best in a semi-relaxed environment. So if we are super, super stressed about something, when I'm not ready to listen to anyone if I'm in a very stressed state, right? I'm not going to listen to, I'm not going to be open to new ideas. I'm not going to be feeling curious about the world around me. I'm just going to be in a closed, no, I need to get out of this stressful situation kind of thing. And so many people have had these bad learning experiences of some kind, whether it's just embarrassment of some sort, or it's genuinely feeling kind of ashamed or humiliated by a, I don't know, a ineffective teacher or by other students. So it's about essentially using what we know about the brain to learn most effectively and make the right connections, make sure that those connections are building on your existing knowledge as well, because we know that building connections is how we learn stuff. We don't learn in a vacuum. So I think that's a summary. I hope I didn't rant on too long, but
no, it's very. And so it is connected with because you were mentioning life coaching and neuroscience. So I am thinking that it involves a change of mindset, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, it depends on what your mindset is already, I would say. But yes, absolutely.
So what, in your experience, what mindset the student tends to have? So when we have bad experiences of in a traditional education setup, we have all these bad teachers or these frustrations and these failures. So we tend to go with a mindset that is not very learning inducive.
Yes, absolutely.
So what would be the right one?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I guess one mindset that I think is quite relevant to talk about here is kind of having an open mindset versus a closed mindset. So and most of us probably do start off with a closed mindset about most things, because that's an easy way to structure the world. It feels safe when we know that this is the way something is, and here are my expectations about how something's going to go. For example, when you come into a teacher-student relationship, you might have certain expectations about, the teacher's going to give me homework. The teacher might assess my level of the language that I'm learning. And then you can have a bunch of other expectations, right, about how that's going to go. And it can be expectations around, okay, they're going to tell me to do grammar, and I hate grammar. I'm, terrified of having to tell the people whether it's going to be avant, avait, or whatever it is, using a French example there, but you know, you're going to have expectations about the things that you enjoy, but also about the things you don't enjoy. And what I try to instill in people is that the opening up that mindset is about saying, okay, you don't enjoy looking at grammar tables and, you know, working through, okay, if it's nous, then you say avant, that kind of thing. I completely understand that. We don't have to do it that way. And there are a bunch of different ways of doing it, different ways of learning something. And if this kind of structured, you know, grammar table, rote repetition thing is not what you enjoy, and it just makes you kind of close off and go, I hate it, then we don't have to do any of that.
What interests me is the idea that it requires that the teachers are more flexible and resourceful as well for the students. Because in general, even if as teachers, and I have my background as teachers, as a teacher, you need or you try to accommodate the student and be flexible and try to, well, I get to know my student and then I do the best I can for them. We tend to have a way of teaching.
Oh yeah, yes, of course.
You do it your way, and then the student sticks with you if that works for them, or they feel frustrated and they leave. In this environment, I'm talking about one-to-one and for teachers who have created their own business. So, but when you are in school, you cannot really escape that
true
situation, and then I think that brings some frustration, and the student ends up believing they cannot learn, or that there is something wrong with them. So it goes back to training the teachers as well, in a way that, well, you really need to find the way that works for your student.
Yes. And I mean, I appreciate that you say that, because that it takes a different, I think it does actually takes a different kind of mindset from the teacher as well. Absolutely, because sometimes I actually come into a session and I'm not sure what we're going to be doing.
Okay.
And you know, because I'll have prepared a few things and I, you know, had some ideas for what we can cover, but then if the student, or if I actually prefer to use coachee or learner rather than student. But if the learner comes in and says, oh, today I really, you know, need to focus on this presentation, or, you know, if they are completely you know, if they are distracted by something else, sometimes it's best to just go with what, you know, where that attention is going. Because if their attention is somewhere else, then they're not going to be learning anything about whatever, you know, pronunciation exercise you thought we would do today, kind of thing. Their attention is going to be somewhere else anyway. And that actually comes back to the neuroscience of it, is that learning, you know, you kind of have to follow it takes a certain recipe to get the learning to actually stick in your memory.
What is the recipe?
I mean, the way I said it makes it sound like I have some secret sauce thing.
That's what I was thinking. Like, tell me.
Well, I mean, to put it simply, I guess it's about, and I'm not a neuroscientist, but I have studied some psychology and neuro-language coaching, and you know, I guess it takes attention. You know what, actually, one thing that I think is better than me just rambling off what I think is talking about a model called images, which is, it takes intention, motivation, and let me see if I remember my lesson right. What's the A? Attention. Sorry, we just talked about that. G is generation. So they have to be able to produce something. E is emotion. So being able to connect emotionally with the thing they're learning. And the S is spacing. Right. So spaced, you know, you have a lot of different apps and tools for doing things like spaced repetition.
Okay, I get it. So intention, motivation, attention, I was taking notes, generation, emotion, and spacing. I really love this, and probably if because we know each other, you probably are not surprised if I say that emotion for me is the most important one, but that's just, I'm biased.
No, I think you're right, actually, because without emotion, you're not going to have that intention. You're not going to have the motivation or the, you know, you're not going to be paying attention to the thing because, and I think that goes back to stress as well. If you're feeling stressed, if you're in an emotional state that's not ready for learning, then everything else is out the window.
And thinking about the brain and the neuroscience, what is the best or optimal emotion or state, how the learner needs to be in order to just, you know, absorb all this information they want to learn?
So imagine like a 7-year-old child playing and having fun. And I'm actually gonna bring up the example of Maria Montessori, who did, you know, she developed this way of allowing children to learn through play rather than through lessons and blackboards and this kind of slightly more traditional way of student-teacher authoritarian perspective. I went to Montessori schools myself for a few years while I was growing up, and I genuinely think that's the reason that I learned to enjoy maths, because they have the most fantastic kind of maths games, and they're so visual and tactile, and you get to play with them and you get to really see the numbers in front of you in a way that I don't think children in normal classrooms actually get to do.
Well, I hated maths. I used to believe I was really, really bad at maths until I started helping children. I was volunteering for an organization, an after school thing, and I had to help the children to do maths. And they had, you know, it was tactile. So there were, I don't know, 10, no, maybe 7, 8, but they had these things that they kind of puzzle things. And I was playing with them, and I started to get excited for maths. And like, but why didn't I do this? Why didn't they help me with this? Numbers was this abstract thing that I couldn't really make sense of and touch. And for some people may work, but for some other people like me, it wasn't like numbers was like, I cannot do maths. And in my 30s, there you go. And how do you think you can make languages tactile? Because the idea of them being tactile appeals to me, just a very, you know, touchy-feely kind of person.
Oh, that's such a good question. The first thought that popped into my head was just fall in love with a native speaker, because then it's very tactile. It's very, you know, but I guess the caveat being that the native speaker shouldn't speak too much of whatever other language you speak and that kind of thing. But I genuinely, you know, I've heard that one before, and I think it's true, and it's probably the reason that I still only really feel like I speak English and Norwegian, because my relationships have only been with people I've spoken English with, actually.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part that may be missing in the language learning mainstream situation. Like there is this, I feel that we keep the language still very abstract.
Yeah.
And unless you have a personal experience, that you have a partner, you have friends, or maybe unless you are living in the country where you make the language real for you, like that doesn't, like that shouldn't be a requirement, I believe. So I find that we keep the language in this very abstract kind of box, that it doesn't really make sense. You're learning something like you're learning a science kind of thing, but it is not real. Very often it is not real for the learner. It's kind of it's in a book, or it's in a
I actually I think that when you're, and I actually, what I'm about to say kind of really, I feel really strongly about this, is that I think part of learning a language is about kind of owning that language for yourself and kind of developing some sense of, this is my language now. Like I have a little piece of it now and it's mine. And there is this wonderful teacher on Twitter, actually, called Kate Clancy. I don't think she minds me promoting her a little bit, but she's a teacher, and she posts poems by her students. And these are students learning English. And a lot of them are refugees who've had a lot of terrible experiences early on, and they are learning kind of how to make the English language theirs, but also how to express themselves, how to they're writing in ways that probably no native English speaker would write, but it's still in their beautiful, unique way. So whatever ways, and I think that's going to be individual for everyone, but in whatever way you can, find some sense of this language being yours.
Yeah, and you just mentioned the magic word, which is poetry.
Yes.
Yeah, and the idea of owning. So I am a firm believer that poetry is one of the best ways to learn a language. When we are talking about a foreign language, that for me, I do not like to use a foreign language. I'm trying to use just non-native, because foreign always stays in, it's not mine, and it will never be. It will always be a foreign language, and I do not like that concept from the beginning, right? So it has to be, I haven't been born in this language, but it can be mine. I can own it in the same way. And poetry for me, after having been working with my students with poetry and in Spanish for a few years, it combines all the ingredients for success in a way, because it is bringing the emotion, it is bringing something that is relevant and has been experienced by the student. You cannot write poetry normally, you can try, but you cannot really write poetry about things you haven't experienced, because the baseline is, you have to write from your senses, from your body, from
and actually
your pain.
Yes, and when you were saying what's tactile and how do we make language tactile, my first thought was metaphor.
Yeah. Oh God.
And that's something we use a lot in poetry, or people use a lot in poetry. I write some poetry now and then, but yeah, metaphor.
In what language do you write poetry?
I think I have to say exclusively. No, I have written it in Norwegian, but I've written a lot of poetry in the English.
Ooh, or you have to share at some point. I'm not going to put you on the spot. But
I have a kind of a secret Instagram page that I don't share with people. I just post stuff.
well, it's too late now. I will be asking you for that account.
Maybe I'll share it with you.
Okay, privately.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, and that's the thing. Like that makes poetry makes the language tangible, and metaphor. And for me, it's like, I think that we don't only use metaphor not only in poetry. Like I think we speak in metaphor most of the time.
Oh yeah.
And it's not only in the ads, and it's like we use metaphor to express and to connect with others, to make the other person actually relate with what we are saying.
Yeah.
And symbols is for me, it's all about metaphor and symbols. We have our symbols in our mind or from our experiences, and that is what we need to find a way to express in every language.
Yeah. And when you're talking about emotion, there's a reason that we use so many metaphors when we talk about emotion, is because sometimes, when we say we're heartbroken, it can literally physically feel that way. And same with, having butterflies. It's all physical feelings that it's impossible to describe without some level of some level of a kind of metaphor or a different, almost like telling a different story on top of the emotions you're feeling.
And yes, and that brings, as you were saying that, I was thinking that is quite of a universal language, because even though, well, there are some universal metaphors and some others that are more group related or tribe related, more cultural related, but in general, there are so many that are the same for everyone. Like heartbroken, I think that would be pretty generic.
Yeah.
And so there is a level of universal language that has to happen.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So
And I mean, what would you understand if I'm walking down the street and let's say I'm Italian and I say, "Oh, I'm eating my socks. My shoes are eating my socks."
I would be confused.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start there. Okay, well, I would think, so the image that is coming is that if you're eating your socks, that means that you have, I don't know, that you have been walking a long time, and that, my experience of that is that when you are walking and the socks keep going down and go under the
toe, sliding into your shoe.
That's the image that comes to mind. So I'm thinking, well, maybe that person has been walking a lot and tired or something. Am I close enough?
So it literally, it's much simpler than, I think you've overcomplicated it.
Oh yeah, well that's my tendency.
It's not a metaphor. It's just, well, it is a metaphor. Obviously, I'm not actually physically eating my sock, but it is. It's an Italian expression or idiom, I guess, for when your sock is sliding into your shoe. If you have very short socks and the heel of the sock comes sliding into your shoe, so your sock is about to fall off.
Okay, well, there you go.
And I just think when I heard that, it still makes me laugh when I hear it. But I just think it's beautiful. It makes sense to me. I mean, it's not a direct it's not literal, but that's the beauty of it.
And it is. And there are so many images that we can relate to, and probably the key is relating to, right? Because why are we using languages if not to make the other person understand our message in beyond their brains.
Yeah.
Kind of really experiencing it, and right.
Do you think, now I'm wondering, do you think that using metaphor is about helping other people to understand it, or is it for ourselves?
Well, I cannot think, like, I never, well, I shouldn't use never, but I normally think that there is more than one reason for things. There is never just one. And I think when we are talking about communication and conversation, probably if I choose to use metaphor is because I want to convey my point, and I am taking you into account.
Yeah.
So I want you to understand my point, and I want to express my point in the most clear way. I would use metaphor for two reasons: to express and for you to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I had intuitively, I felt like metaphor might be mostly for myself, but maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just how I express metaphor, and maybe I'm just that self-centered.
No, but I understand. So let's say, why, when you write poetry, what's the process? Like, what do you have anybody in mind? Or so why do you write poetry?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, I write poetry almost as a type of therapy. It's to get stuff out, and sometimes it's addressed to someone. Other times it's simply for myself. I think a lot of the times actually addressed at a specific person. For me. Yeah.
And why is it public? Why is it in that Instagram account and not just in your notebook?
That's a very good question. I literally started it like 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
On a whim. Yeah. And that's a good question. I just felt like, well, sometimes I think we all think we're little geniuses, right? We have some thought, and some words that fit nicely on a page, and we think, oh my God, nobody's ever written this before, and it's amazing. So I think it's a little bit of an, partly it's just an ego trip of me thinking, oh, maybe my poetry is quite good and maybe some people like it. But I think partly it's also that I think people might kind of take a bit of inspiration from it. I don't write it for anyone else, but when I have written it and I look at it and I think, oh, maybe somebody else needs to hear this. So I think that's why I published it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's, you made a very good point. I think I do believe that we write poetry very often just because we need to put things out. Like whether it's an emotion, a memory, that there is an urge that is beyond us, just to put something out there. Let it be expressed. I think that there is the human need of being expressed. But there is also this, we know we are not alone. We know we don't live in isolation. We know we are part of something. And I think that is completely related. We need to express, and also we are aware that this product of our expression is going to be consumed, is going to be seen, is going to be read or heard. And we know deep down, I believe, that's just my belief, but I know deep down that is going to have an impact, that we relate to that because we have read something from poetry from some other people. And sometimes we have read poems from a super famous poet, and sometimes we have read a line from a random person and that has touched our heart and maybe has changed our lives.
Yeah.
And we know that that could be coming from anywhere. So I think that there is something beyond our intellect that tells us, no, you have to put this out there because you never know who you are going to inspire.
And I know you're a big fan of spirituality as well. And there is, because as I was speaking and as I was saying that, maybe it's a bit of an ego trip, I just want people to like me, or I want people to like my poetry, but actually it's almost, on the other hand, it's almost egocentric to think that nobody else has had my experience. Right? Lots of people, millions of people have had the exact same experience as me. I'm not so special that whatever I write and whatever I create is going to be interesting only to myself. Chances are, lots of other people will have had a different feeling, a different experience, or a different, similar experience or similar emotion.
Exactly. And that ties with languages. What I think is the emotion and the experience is common, but the way it is expressed and communicated is unique.
Yeah.
And in every person, so it is unique, but it is valuable for the other person. That person may need to read this unique experience that is coming from you, because maybe for them that is the relatable one, and not the one that Shakespeare wrote.
True.
Yeah. So that makes you feel connected. That makes you feel less alone.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I think that is so important, is that knowing that even if the words are different, you're not alone in your experience. And we have this strange thing in kind of Western culture of this, I don't know, some people call it like the snowflake hypothesis or whatever, this idea that everyone is so unique and so special. And but actually imagine if everyone was incredibly unique and special, then we would all just be alone, like little satellites floating around in space with no kind of connection to other things or no similarity with other things, which would be super depressing.
Yeah. Like I wouldn't like to live there. Like the idea is connection, right? We're all kind of connected with each other and with everything that is around. I think. I want to ask you something that you mentioned in your bio, and that brings us back to language.
Okay.
So my question is, why do you think learning a language is so important, or why do you think it is an element or ingredient for success?
Yeah.
What happens with languages?
If I'm being very kind of obvious and cheesy, I would say it's transferable skills. You get a lot of, it's boring, right? But you get so much from learning a language that you don't think about when you're thinking, oh, I'm going to learn Spanish. But then what you get when you learn a language is you kind of build, you get a different perspective on the world. And of course you can get this in other ways, but language learning is one of potentially the easier ways of doing it, more tangible ways of doing it, cheaper ways of doing it. Potentially you don't have to travel to learn a language, and to gain new perspectives. You build empathy, you build problem solving skills and creativity, and all of this has been scientifically proven as well. It's not just me saying, oh yeah, it's super cool.
Well, you could say it, and I would say yes. Like sometimes we don't need these papers to say, to say that we are right. We're working with languages.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And why empathy? Why languages helps us to?
Yeah. Okay, this one I'm not sure if it's scientifically proven, but
well, it doesn't matter. I trust you.
I have a sense that learning a language forces you into humility in a way, I guess. And I feel like humility and empathy go slightly hand in hand, because it forces you to feel quite useless for a period of time when you can't express what you need to say, and you don't understand everything, and you're in this kind of kind of like baby phase of just feeling like you can say a couple of words here and there, and then the rest just goes way over your head. And I think building that humility and knowing that, okay, I have to rely on other people, and I have to kind of appreciate that I'm not getting anywhere without other people's kind of perspectives and inputs. Even if you're just learning through an app or through reading or whatever, even if you're not directly working with other people, you're still having to rely on the resources that other people have created. And more importantly, I think the kind of perspectives that other people have as well. You can't come in with your own perspective and say, no, I think we should say it this way. Because here I am, and I'm just learning this language. No, you have to kind of listen to how other people do it, and then eventually at some point you might start, for example, producing poetry, and then you can kind of bend the rules, change the rules, break the rules as you want, but you still have to kind of learn the rules of this other way of thinking that is probably different from how you've learned it originally.
Totally. I love that. And so
I just want to ask you, Maria, what do you think about empathy and language learning?
Well, I think that it's very similar to what you were saying. Is that for me is we can empathize with someone when we understand what that person is going on, what that person is going through. Sorry. So when you only have one language, when you have never learned a language, when you have never tried to communicate with someone in a language that you don't master, that is a set of experiences that you have never had. There is a level of a low level of vulnerability that you have never experienced, and so it's just, even without taking into account the different perspectives that are obviously massively important, it's just the lack of experience. And I am grateful that I was born in Spain, where I have to learn another language. Just to live in other countries. But when that doesn't happen, I think that, as I said, this lack of experiences, this lack of vulnerability, this lack of, I need this language or another language just to survive, to relate to other people. So that is something that is missing. And when that is missing, and you are talking to someone who has been experiencing that, there is a lack of empathy. I cannot relate to your vulnerability. I cannot relate to your struggle. So that, for me, that would be at the very basic level, the lack of experience.
Yeah, I can see that. And actually what you mentioned about vulnerability is so important. Yeah.
Do you think that a language learner that is not willing to be vulnerable can succeed in the language, can really learn it?
they'd be making it a lot harder for themselves. I'm not gonna say never, but I think it. That would be. I just feel. I feel almost physical pain from trying to imagine learning a language without feeling vulnerable, because essentially that's about trying to learn a language without making mistakes, which is I tried doing that for a little while when I was just started at my first English speaking school when I was 15, and I basically just didn't say much or many words at all because I was terrified of making any mistakes and sounding like I didn't speak English. Even though I had been speaking English for a few years, I still just was terrified of making mistakes. It didn't go, at one point I just had to speak and I just had to make mistakes, and
and it is very important. So it is this fear of making mistakes that I think in our culture is something that we have been like infused since we are little. Like there is a problem with making mistakes. I don't know where that comes from, but also the idea that you mentioned, what was it? Yeah, you were worried or concerned about what the other person is going to think about you.
Yeah.
I totally relate. I get it. And I would say that the majority of us, we are in these societies, kind of what the other person thinks is probably much more important than what you need to say, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of expression are we having when we are more concerned about what the other person is going to think than what I need to say?
Yeah. It's true. I think a lot of communication gets kind of blocked by that, actually, because you just end up saying what you think other people want you to say, or saying what's expected. And it's like, oh yeah, I love that artist. When you're a teenager, it's all about, like what actors and music and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. And when we are communicating in a different language and we are more concerned of what the other person thinks of us, how do you think that limits our expression in a language that we don't yet master?
Oh, well, I'd like to think that if as an adult you're learning another language, it might be easier to let go of that fear, and to be able to just express yourself with, I guess, less of a filter, or less of this idea of, well, here's what I think I need to say, or I think I should say, or think is expected of me. But I'm sure there are people who probably have that filter throughout their life, and that sounds exhausting to me.
Oh, it really does. And I find that you can really rarely connect with the other person if you have that filter super high. But I am thinking about languages. So, for example, you and I, we have one native language, and it's not the one that we are communicating, which is English, all the time, right? We are expected to communicate in English in a certain way because we live in an English-speaking country. So is that limiting the way you express yourself?
Oh my God. This is a much bigger question than I thought you were asking.
I know. But what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Okay, sorry, just so I understand the question. So the fact that we are speaking a language that's not, kind of a first language, is that limiting our expression, how we express ourselves?
Yeah. So what I would say is that, are we putting the focus on the other person who is listening to us? and we are communicating in this language, which is not our first language. This kind of relationship, this kind of situation, this kind of trio, this is the language, this is ourselves with our first language, and then there is the other person who is expecting a certain level from us, or expecting a certain way of expressing. We expect things from people. Depending on the nationality, their language, their accent, all these things. Is it limiting?
Okay, so this reminds me of a conversation I had with a client about actually being in let's say a work setting where none of the people who are in the room have English as their first language. So everyone's got English as their second or third or fourth language, right? And this person was saying how their English, essentially, they felt that their English was getting worse with being in a non-native English sort of environment. And it sort of touched on something, because I thought, the same happens to me. My English gets worse, whatever that means.
Yeah, worse, I think that's it's important.
Yeah, but there is on the one hand, okay, so it gets less British, or less kind of native, or less kind of conforming to whatever regional dialect you're maybe more used to conforming to. But actually, in a strange way, you can be in these and by the way, I think something like 85% of conversations in English are held with no native speaker present, and I say native with quotation marks, but some 85% of conversations in English. But so actually, I don't know if, I wonder if not having sort of a native or a, as we have now, we do have this idea of a listener who might be anyone, but we don't have a native speaker right here. And it changes, I think it does change the conversation, or it changes the way we express ourselves. Maybe for some people that means expressing yourself more genuinely, because you don't have that filter of the regional accent, for example, or the Britishness, or the, you live in Ireland, don't you? Yeah, like the Irish, like regional slang and all that stuff, and you don't have to kind of add anything to kind of fit in with that language or that culture. And so maybe you and I have a more open expression. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I think we do, because I was just comparing, as you were saying that, I was comparing how I speak with native English native speakers, and when I speak with non-native, like in general, whatever country they are in. And my English feels more real when I am in this non-native situation, because I feel that these other people, they have their quirks, quotation marks. They have their way. They may be using words that I do not know. But I remember being in groups, and I remember learning words. I learned words in Polish when I was once working in an environment, and I was working with a group of Polish people. We were communicating in English all the time, but they learned words in Spanish that I was just using because I felt freer. Because I understood that they were willing and open and able to absorb my words, because they already had a second language. So that was kind of implicit, like we know that this is not our native, but we are still communicating. So I felt more freer. Whereas when I am, as you were saying, when I am with native speakers, I kind of try to fit the norm, fit this magic abstract rule that changes depending on where you where you are. So yeah, and what is interesting to me is that I felt with native speakers, I feel there is a hierarchy. They are the authority, and I am not. And so I cannot own the language.
You know what? That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Whereas where I am in a group with non-native speakers, we are all equal. So I can bring my authentic way, and they can bring yours, and we find a way to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's true. You actually kind of get to own the language on more equal terms, and actually create your own language as well, right? If you're in a group of 5 people, all from different countries, let's say, and you come with a Spanish word, and everyone just agrees, okay, that's the word that we'll use for this thing. Like, you know, you just create a new word because you've forgotten what the English word is, for example, right? Or there's this amazing concept that only has a fantastic word for it in Polish, and then everybody's like, yeah, okay, cool. And you've grown, you've kind of what's the word, like you have you know, essentially the English language has evolved into its own little sociolect between you as a group. Yeah.
I would like to end with a question for you, because now that is getting into a very interesting area. It's a quick late in the conversation, but this is, like, I'm excited. But anyway, so do you think that it is possible for us, and I am talking as a collective, the entire human race, can we reach a point in which there is no authority in terms of languages, because I don't think there should be, personally, in which we can bring our own real expression, like that's it. Like I'm bringing some words in Spanish, or some words in French, or some words in Polish, because they made sense to me. Can we do that?
That's an excellent question. Some kind of science fiction novel that could be possible. Yeah. And if it's possible in science fiction, maybe it's possible in real life. I don't know. I'd like to think, I think definitely in some communities, in some places, that's probably already the case. Actually, a lot of places, I think that's already the case. But it just, I do think that there will probably always be someone who is kind of policing how language should be. And I take just very quickly, I'll take Norway as an example, because in Norway, the written language is quite flexible. It's quite it's not as kind of strict. The grammar rules and the rules aren't as strict as in English or as in French, where you kind of I still find it ridiculous that the English language has evolved so much since when was, Shakespearean type 500 years ago, right? And yet we still have RIGHT is right, and we don't say richt, which I think back when they said richt, it made sense to spell it like that. Yeah. But we haven't said that for literally like centuries and centuries. Nobody says that, and we still have this stupid spelling, right? And so in Norway, they have these kind of reforms. So every maybe 20 or 30 or 40 years, they will change the allowed spelling of words based on pronunciation and based on the changes in the spoken languages. And I say languages because or dialects, I guess. Mm-hmm. But even there, you still have a lot of people, myself included, sometimes when I'm like, ugh, people saying things wrong, people writing things wrong, So yeah, I think we'll always have some people wanting to police language.
And what's the
Unfortunately.
intention behind that policing?
Structure. We like things to be in some kind. We like clarity. You know, we like to know what's right and what's wrong. We like to have a sense of some kind of rules. Even the people that don't like rules, we like to have a sense of certainty. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is not, I don't like saying this, but there is nothing wrong about, well, maybe not policing the language or the users, but maybe if it was a little bit more gentle and inclusive, maybe a little bit of policing is okay. But I do have problems when the policing goes into because I find that there are different kinds of policing. There is policing your own people, and then policing other groups of people that are not native, and that's where I start to find the issue, because languages have been since always a product of merging with other languages. So why are we so set in, no, this language can adopt these terms, but they cannot adopt these, or can take these but cannot take these, and you saying this is wrong even though for you it does make complete sense. So I still have some, I guess I don't have a clear idea of, is it policing, is it good or is it bad?
I think generally, I think it's probably going to be one of those things like flowing water. It's always going to happen, but you don't necessarily have to let it. You can just let it wash over you, right? You can, if I'm keeping with this water metaphor, right? So it's you can just let it wash over you, and then it's like a nice shower. You know, you don't have to think, oh, because this person said you can't do that, then I have to change the way I speak, or I have to change the way I express myself, or I have to limit myself expression based on it. You can just kind of, like, people are going to have their opinions.
That's theirs.
It's theirs. Yeah.
Nothing to do with you.
And there'll always be debates, and there'll always be reactions to things. And that's natural, and it's never going to stop.
And it's actually good.
It's great.
Having a debate is where we move on, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
Fine. Okay, so we're going to finish, but before I let you go, where can we find you, and any last message you want to give to our audience? So
if you're interested in my language coaching services, you can find me on hedvigsandbu.com. And I'm sure, Maria, you can have that spelled out somewhere.
It will be all written with the conversation notes and all your links in the website and in the YouTube video, everything.
Hedvig Sandbu is fairly easy to find, so you can find on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and I am actually in the process right now of producing my own podcast, which is going to be coming out beginning of October, I think, or sometime in October is what I'll say.
So I have then another question. What is the podcast going to be about? What can we expect from that?
Yes, thank you for asking. It's going to be actually about, it's going to be primarily aimed at people who are struggling to learn their second language. So people who've studied some bits of language in school, most of us have, I think, but who just haven't been able to make the next step into being able to hold a conversation or being able to do what they want with the language. And I think it'll be interesting for other people as well, in terms of, I'll have guests, and hopefully maybe I'll have you as a guest. People who honestly inspire me, and hopefully will inspire my listeners as well. There'll also be some more practical tips and different stories from different people. So,
well, I'm excited to. I have to wait until October, but
yeah.
I'm excited. Okay, well, thank you very much for just coming and having a chat with me. I really enjoyed, and I think we've made very juicy and interesting points, and I would say even the starter of conversations, just for people to start thinking about certain things. So I am really grateful for that.
Thank you so much, Maria. I love that you reached out to me, and I'm so excited that we managed to have this conversation.
Me too. So I wish you a beautiful day, and bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.